Looking to know what characters are best in Season 38 of IDV? This is the video for you. Let's get into the video. So I have 5 different tiers that I've split this tier list up. We've got S, A, B, C, and D tier. We're going to start off right at the bottom. We are going to start with Mind's Eye. So I believe that Mind's Eye is currently the worst character in the game right now. Mind's Eye gets a very, very fast decoding buff, but is very, very fragile and is also kind of sort of colorblind at the same time. So her visibility's down. She's very, very fragile. Not much more really needed to be said about Mind's Eye. Mind's Eye is very weak when there are other survivors that get similar decoding buffs and don't have all of the debuffs with vaulting and stuff that Mind's Eye has to deal with. So I would put Mind's Eye in D tier. And up next, I would put Doctor. Doctor, this may be a little bit controversial, but I believe that Doctor is the second to worst character in the game. Doctor has a very, very simple game plan, and despite how much the devs seem to make her want to be good by changing the persona web and everything, Doctor is still a very, very niche character. She has her matchups where she can do decent, but she has no particularly like super, super strong matchups. And when she's kiting, she pretty much has one game plan which revolves around standing in one place, which in a game like IDV, you can't just camp one pallet against most characters. There's some characters that works against, but there are characters like Barmaid. I'm trying to think of some other characters. There are characters that can heal while they're moving, and so it just kind of makes Doctor obsolete when Barmaid does the same thing but better. Now up next, I would actually put Thief down here. Now there was a point during, I think it was Season 35, Thief was getting a little bit of use because of the fact that if you can catch her out in the open, Thief was decent against Sangria. But the issue is a lot of hunters have projectiles that can either reach past the radius to reach the survivor, or they can just do like the charge attack and kind of ignore the flashlight altogether using camera angles and stuff like that. He has received some buffs in the last few seasons, but not enough to really make him particularly viable, except for extreme circumstances. And so the last survivor I have for this tier is going to be Little Girl. Now Little Girl, as a Dream Witch main, is very, very annoying. However, Little Girl is not very good against most characters. She ends up being a lot of like a Hail Mary type of pick. Like she either works and works for like the final body block, or she just doesn't, and most of the time she doesn't. So I would put Little Girl down here at the top of a D tier. Now up next, we have C tier. These characters are pretty okay. You'll get some good wins occasionally, but are nothing like too particularly special. And so in the bottom of this tier, let me see if I can find him. I would put Composer. So Composer is a pretty okay survivor. He does get decode really, really quickly. But when it comes to Composer, there are just things that the other decoders do better than Composer. He does get little speed boosts, but while he has to do that, he has to do a lot of multitasking type of things, which can be a little bit visually distracting in a game like IDV. And I think that other decoders just get more benefits off of their abilities, even though Composer does have a little bit of speed boost and kiting potential. I think that the other decoders just kind of do a better job at what Composer is supposed to do. So that's why I'm putting him down in C tier. Now up next, I'm going to put Painter. Let me see if I can find where Painter is. Here's Painter. So Painter is a survivor that is used to be like really, really good, like meta, but has really, really fallen off. Mostly because of the fact that there are some hunters that have been introduced to the game that really makes it so that Painter doesn't have the time to set up the way he needs to. And Painter is pretty defenseless in the early game until he's able to get his first painting up. And because that can take a decent amount of time and he only gets so much stun time with one painting, he can be pretty decent when it comes to support, but the fact that hunters can either move their camera angles and kind of ignore it entirely, or there are characters like Ivy that make it really tough to actually get that image in the first place. I think Painter does have his specific matchups where he still does really well, but against a lot of characters in a lot of hunters in higher tiers, Painter just doesn't perform as well as the other kiters. Now, in kind of a similar realm, I would also put Cowboy down here. Now, this may be, I'm going to say this a lot for some of these lower characters, may be a little bit controversial. Cowboy does actually have a decent kiting game and can do reasonably well against Bonbon specifically. Any characters that struggle to catch down survivors while they're transitional kiting, Cowboy's going to be a really, really good kiter, but his harassment sometimes leaves a bit to be desired, in my opinion. There are just other characters that either do his job better, but it's also getting to the point, especially with some of the more recent characters to be introduced, this is not really a harasser's game anymore. So Cowboy, while he does have some instances where he can do really well from kind of a kiting aspect, I believe that Cowboy is relatively lackluster in his kit. So up next, I am also going to put Entomologist in C tier. Now, Ento had her moment to shine. She does really, really well against specific characters, namely Axeboy. characters that are kind of lower on the tier list, like Axeboy, like Ripper, Ento does actually pretty well, but and she can do really decent with support, but there are just other characters that, once again, you're going to notice this a lot with kind of the C tier characters. The reason why they're down here is because there's stuff that other characters can do that's similar to Ento's ability, but just better. And for that reason, I'm going to put Ento also in C tier. Now, up next, I'm going to put Perfumer. Now, Perfumer has stayed pretty much the same for, like, a very long time, but I would also put Perfumer down here in C tier. Now, I think that Perfumer, by now, functions as kind of like a watered-down Magician. I think Magician does pretty much the same thing that Perfumer does, but better. And the reason because of that is in order to get full effect of her perfumes, Perfumer needs to be at max health, so that already makes Magician a little bit better. But also, Perfumer is more prone to feeding hunters, and especially when you have characters like Ivy, like Sculptor into the game that really rely on presence to get going. Having a character whose entire ability feeds presence is not something that's particularly desirable, at least in today's meta. So for that reason, I'm going to put Perfumer down here. And up next is a character that is just recently got buffed to the point where she's actually pretty decent right now, and why she's kind of sitting in the pretty Aight tier when she would previously have gone kind of down in D tier with all of the rest of the characters I put down there. We have Enchantress. Now she starts with 1 stun, so she's not completely useless in the early game, which was pretty much the main criticism of where she was at before. There are just other characters that, again, do what she does, but a little bit more effective. It takes some time to build up that guard. She does reasonably well against the chip shot characters, and but she does have some specific matchups that are a little bit rough. Enchantress is weak to Dream Witch, weak to... I would argue that she's pretty weak to Goatman, not particularly helpful against Hulla. So I would put Enchantress in kind of the C tier category. And up next is a character that's Toy Merchant. Now, I would actually argue that Toy Merchant can be somewhere between like A and B tier on the right map. So, namely, Eversleeping and Chinatown, Toy Merchant is actually quite decent. But on any other map that don't have kind of like the varying levels that Toy Merchant is able to take advantage of, I would say that she's kind of down here in kind of the C tier area. She is still really strong against a lot of non-meta, as most survivors in this game are. But she has kind of fallen off, especially... Goatman in particular is able to pull her out of the little glider ability that she has just by kind of going through. You kind of keep her stuck in kind of the same area. And there are other characters that also have stuff at least to deal with Toy Merchant. And for that reason, I'm putting her down in C tier. Now up next, I have Escapologist. I would put Escapologist in this tier. The best thing about his kit currently, I would actually argue, is the fact that he's able to get 1 hit for free, essentially as like a free flywheel. That's really useful as part of his kit, but the smokescreen doesn't really do anything, at least against really good hunters. Escapologist is not really going to be... Like, the smokescreen, it might do something against players that are less experienced with the game, but with pro hunters, a lot of times they're able to really predict where survivors are going to go. So the smoke doesn't really do a whole lot. Now, there are specific characters, namely like Bonbon and especially Mad Eyes, that rely on certain chairs. So moving the chair can be really useful, especially when you're moving away from a Cypher. But again, with really good like survivor gameplay, you're typically going to be dying next to the chair that you really want to be chaired at. So I would say Escapologist has this potential, probably as a kiter, but I would say that there are, once again, survivors that can do what he does a little bit more effectively. I think his item is not particularly the most useful. And so up next, I'm going to put Journalist. Now, played optimally, Journalist is actually a very good survivor, but Journalist just requires a bit more precision than a lot of the other rescuers that are going to be on this list. So I would say that Journalist, she does have her characters that she pretty much gets guaranteed rescues off of, but when it comes to doing like all the little body blocks, it can require a lot of precision. There's a lot of chances that you can use your ability and it ends up being relatively useless. So I would say that Journalist is in C tier. A lot of her abilities can be a little bit predictable, and if you end up really close to a Journalist, it almost ends up being like a 50-50 toss-up as to whether you're actually going to get the body block or not. So it requires a lot of precision. If played well, she's a very good survivor, but there are other survivors that require less work to get similar results. And so up next, I'm going to put Pharaoh Lady. Now, Pharaoh Lady down here, I believe she actually is very good against kind of some of the more multitasking characters like Bloody Queen, or not Bloody Queen, Dream Witch and Ivy. So Pharaoh is very good against Dream Witch and Ivy, but is relatively weak against hunters that can kind of strike from a distance. So if there's like a Gamekeeper in the match, if there's a Bloody Queen in the match, if there is a Mad Eyes in the match, characters that are able to do stuff to this character from more of a distance are able to do a lot more against Pharaoh Lady, and sometimes it's very predictable where the survivor is going to go, so the invisibility doesn't necessarily do all that much a lot of the time. There are also characters that are a lot less committal, namely like Wax Artist, who can kind of back up and kind of cover a whole area with his ability. So the kiting thing isn't so great. However, the decoding part of her kit, where she's able to get like 10% right away, is really, really good. Another thing that she has that's really good is her ability to draw from another cipher. The only issue I have with that is I feel like Pharaoh Lady is just kind of a watered-down version of what Prisoner has, so I don't really see why you would ever pick Pharaoh Lady when Prisoner just exists. So that's just my opinion. So I'm putting her in C tier. And up next is a character that's actually been seeing some gameplay in IVL. He has his specific circumstances, and that's going to be Explorer, mainly so that you can just kind of hide in the early game. If you're solo queuing in rank, this is not necessarily what you want to go for, but hiding in the early game can be a really, really good way to get ahead of what the hunter wants. In addition to this, pulling the pages also does really well against these more cipher pressure-y type hunters. So if you're going up against like a Dream Witch or an Ivy, even Goatman can be this way. Basically, a hunter that likes to patrol between the final few ciphers and get a cipher lock. If you can get pages, that can be a way that you can really force them out, or kind of brute force your way through that stage of the game, which makes Explorer pretty good. So I'm going to put him down in C tier. I believe that there are characters that are able to do things better, but a respectable survivor under specific circumstances. The issue with Explorer is that if he's caught in the early game, he's pretty much an instant death. So there's that. Now up next, I'm going to put Batter. Batter is going to be the last one in C tier here. Now Batter is, I would argue, one of the best harassers in this game. So Batter is able to, he has his balls that he's able to do that, and with like the Rage, he's able to do a lot of balloon rescue type of things. Batter is fairly decent in particular like transitional kiting areas, but can sometimes struggle in more tight areas where if you commit to throwing your ball at the hunter, sometimes if they're next to a wall, the hunter will clip a wall and you'll get pretty much no effect out of your ability. So when it comes to kiting, Batter can be, in my experiences, a little bit more on the fragile side, which is why I kind of put him more in C tier. The early game is not necessarily as consistent as other hunters, but I would argue with the harassment ability, he probably has the most potential to get a lot of benefit out of his ability. So I would put Batter in C tier, and he's at the top of that. So up next, I'm going to move up to B tier. Now, these are characters that are really good picks. So I would say that these are characters that once you start playing these, you can really start to see quite a few wins in ranked. You might consider using these in a tournament setting if you're interested in that type of a thing. And the survivor I would put kind of in the bottom of this tier is Postman. Now, Postman, he does have some survivability with his dog. That can be very useful when it comes to buying time for you to transition to a new area, so he's not particularly weak. And I would say that he gets a lot of value out of his letters, particularly the decoding letter is very good to throw one of those out in the early game, and that's basically one of the main things that's carrying Postman up to B tier is his letter that he has. So I would put him, he's a good pick. You can't really go wrong with him. Now up next, I would put Female Dancer. Now, Dancer is a good character because of the fact that she's able to place down her boxes and is able to kind of passively help a lot of the other survivors without being like a huge commitment. She can use the fast boxes to decode faster. And I would say one of the best maps that I've seen her played on is Arms Factory. If you kind of take those slow boxes, you can cover a lot of area in Factory to assist a lot of the other survivors. Now, there are some hunters that don't really care about her ability so much, so I believe that there are characters that are able to offer better assistance, but I would say that Female Dancer is a really good pick, and I think that she kind of belongs kind of in the middle of the road currently where she stands, so I would put her in B tier. Now up next, and I believe he is one of the better harassers in this game, and that is going to be Forward. Now I would say that Forward is a very good pick. He does have specific matchups that are really tough for him, namely Anne is really tough and Ivy is really tough for him, but he's able to do a lot of really good things when it comes to like instant rescuing stuff. He can function a lot for hunters as excitement bait, so if you're wanting to not worry about blink so much, you may consider carrying something like a Forward. And the reason why he's better than Batter is I would say that Forward has more potential to support survivors in the middle of a kite just through like little stuns. I've seen quite a bit of competitive gameplay where a Forward is able to get a lot of mini stuns in clutch situations for their teammate survivors, and I believe that kind of the support potential that Forward has puts him in B tier. Now up next, I am going to put Mechanic. I believe that Mechanic is a really, really good decoder. And I would say that Mechanic is, I wouldn't say only, but is mostly good only if there's another decoder in the match. So one thing that a lot of comps like to do is they like to do particularly Mechanic and Prisoner combo. That's something that's really particularly good. So Mechanic is able to decode with bot in the main body at the same time, so being able to push multiple ciphers, especially if you have another survivor that's having a bit of a longer first kite, makes her very good. The one thing that I would say kind of holds Mechanic back is that she herself is a little bit of a fragile character, so most hunters, especially if you're going against an opera or any other type of like rushdown chase character, geisha too, Mechanic is not going to last very long, so you may end up in some weird situations, which I believe kind of makes some of the other decoders a little bit more optimal. If the hunter catches the doll, it can feed presence, that type of a thing. So I would put Mechanic in B tier. I think I'm happy with that placement. Kind of in a similar realm, I would also put Lawyer. I believe that Lawyer is also a good decoder, mostly for his decoding speed that increases as he does it more through the match. That makes it so that he decodes really, really fast and is fast to priming a cipher in the late game. And his map is also really good in ranked if you're doing like solo queuing type of thing, being able to know where the other hunter's at. But I have seen some teams use the map also to their ability on maps. I believe particularly Chinatown he's used a lot. And if you have a Lawyer on the team and you're in VC, you can do a lot when it comes to hunter rotations, which I believe makes a Lawyer a very, very good asset to the team. So Lawyer, I believe, belongs in kind of this B tier category. And up next, I'm going to be putting Patient. Patient is a pretty solid rock hider. He has fallen off a little bit since when he was pretty much being spammed like all the time in combination with Psychologist. Patient does have a really good ability. It can get canceled out by certain stuns, that type of a thing, but I believe that Patient is a really solid pick. There can be some really broken hook areas. If you know how to do those, you can be really scary when you're kiting. So I believe that Patient is an overall pretty well-rounded character. I don't think there's really much wrong with picking Patient in a match unless you're going against a character that can cancel the hooks out. Now, up next, I'm going to put a survivor that has fallen off just kind of like a little bit, which I believe is Cheerleader. And I believe that this is mostly a result of some of the newer hunters that have been added into the game. I believe that there are a lot of hunters that are able to catch Cheerleader, particularly when she slows down after her dashes. She seems to be a lot less scary than what she kind of used to be, probably because she's been in the game longer. The stuff that she goes for is a lot more predictable. And the one thing that she does have is that she's able to do a lot of passive support from a distance. That's one thing that I would say that Cheerleader has that makes her really good. But she's a solid kiter, but it kind of takes her a little bit to recharge her little pom-pom things. And typically if you're tying two of them together, it kind of leaves you in a fragile state afterwards. So as long as you're playing a hunter that can take advantage of those slow times, Cheerleader usually isn't too much of a problem. But I would say overall, if you're good at rock kiting, she can be a solid pick. Now, up next is a character that I had mentioned earlier. I would put Magician in this B tier. So I would say that Magician is, once again, similar to Patient, really, really solid kind of base kiter. So Magician is also a very specific counter to Ivy as well. So Magician is really, really good. Not a whole lot of downsides, but they're just characters that are also a lot more useful in a lot more situations. Being that you're just kind of like a raw kiter, one thing that I've seen a lot in this meta is it prioritizes survivors that are able to also provide support, which is something that Magician just doesn't do. So B tier he goes. Now up next is something that's been is a character that's seen a lot of competitive play recently. I'm gonna put Lucky Guy in B tier. He has potential to be higher, but Lucky Guy is a character that his veteran buff offers a lot, but the big reason why people play him is because he's able to pick the items that he's able to do. So he's one of the few survivors I would say that's like decently high up on the tier list and actually gets competitive play, because he has a lot of stuff that he kind of sort of does. The main issue here is that he's kind of a master of none, at least in my opinion. Being that a lot of the good draws are kind of 50-50, you do have some chances of risking gambling on your little package that you get in the early game and not getting a good item that you really need. So I would say that Lucky Guy is in B tier, but if he gets the items that he needs at the time that he needs it, for instance, getting a gun when you're kiting, getting, I guess, like a watch also if you're kiting, yeah, gun for rescue. If he gets the right item at the right time, the one thing that Lucky Guy does really nicely is that sometimes he can also force the hunter to chase him, because if you don't chase a Lucky Guy, he'll throw down a bot, and then you'll have basically another mechanic on the team just by having a Lucky Guy on the team. So I would say he's overall a solid pick, but he does have potential to not get a ton of value. So I put him in B tier. Now up next is one of my own personal favorite survivors. I would say that Muro is an overall good pick. The reason why he's not higher in my opinion is because Muro does have some specific counters. So like Hullabaloo in particular, his balls are able to hit through the boar. Gamekeeper is able to pull him off. When he tries to harass, there are some characters that are able to kind of block him off into an area, namely like Goatman. Mad Eyes can do kind of a similar thing. So he can't do a lot of... He can't really do interacting while he's in the boar state, but it is really good being able to traverse the map really, really quickly, and he is able to be a really good rescuer as a result. He kind of does a similar thing to Mercenary, being able to traverse bigger areas at faster speeds. So I would say that Wildling is overall in B tier, a really, really solid pick. So that is where I'm going to put him for now. The one thing that's kind of holding him back is that his decoding speed can be quite punishing. So B tier he goes. Now I realized this in the post-editing, I forgot about one character, and that is Weeping Clown. Weeping Clown, I believe, belongs just above Muro, kind of for the similar reasons that I said for Muro. He's able to do a bit of support. He's also really good when it comes to kiting in the early game. Is relatively simple to use. I believe that he's overall pretty well-rounded and belongs in B tier. And up next, I am going to put Professor. Now Professor, I would say, is not particularly great when it comes to a kiting aspect, but the stuff that he does really well is actually it comes to a lot of his support that he's able to do. So being able to drop the scales, which can be picked up by other survivors, is a great way to assist kind of passively while you're decoding away. Another thing that's also really good is when you're going for body block situations. This is actually one of the better parts of his kit, is that he actually slows down the swing, so survivors have more time to react to it, in addition to Professor when he tries to react with his own ability. So I would say overall, Professor is a overall solid pick. He just requires a specific matchup, so he's really good. He's being used a lot now against Goatman in particular, but there are other characters that are able to take advantage of Professor's weaknesses. Namely, if you're going against a hunter that kind of relies more on their abilities, Professors can be kind of weak. So I think he's a good kind of middle-of-the-road character. He gets a lot of benefit when the right hunter is picked, but when there's a character pick that's strong against Professor, you can struggle a lot. So up next, I would say is kind of in a similar boat, I would say is Archer. Now Archer is a character that I would say in my personal opinion, at least the way I've seen it, Archer does really, really good against mobility characters. So if you're looking at characters like Hullabaloo is a big one. A lot of people are looking at Archer as being a potential counter to Hullabaloo because of the fact that he builds up a lot of that that heart effect. I forget what it's called off the top of my head. But when you shoot the hunter, Archer is able to add a lot of that 100 ability where she shoots the arrow. So I would say that Archer is going to be really good against Hullabaloo. She's also really good in the fact that she's able to cancel a lot of abilities if she's locked on. There are a lot of instances where she's really, really solid. However, I would say that there are a lot of instances where Archer's ability does not put on as much pressure as it could, being that the stun is actually not that long. I think that's kind of the main thing holding Archer back compared to other stunners, is that the stun, going to 100 and getting the stun isn't really the end of the world, because the stun doesn't actually last that long. So I think Archer belongs kind of at the higher end of B tier. Now up next, I am going to put, where's Luca? Here's Prisoner here. Now, Prisoner is probably one of, if not the best decoder in the game. I think that Prisoner is overall very, very solid in the fact that he's able to stay stationary at a safe cipher and decode from a distance. He's able to finish rescuers' ciphers when they go for the rescue, and he's a great addition to the team when it comes to making sure that you're not going to fall behind on decoding when you have a Prisoner on the team. So I would say that Prisoner overall is a good pick. Can't really go wrong with him. There are better survivors to be picked, but I believe that Prisoner is still a very, very solid pick. He's one of the most used survivors on this server, so can't really go too wrong with him. Now, up in A tier, I believe we're starting to get into kind of the best survivors, which are the ones remaining here. So these are survivors that I believe are either really consistent and pull for draws, or can fight for a win without being really too committal about it. So In the bottom of this tier, I would argue that Coordinator belongs in this tier. Now, Coordinator is able to shoot her gun early to pretty much get a guaranteed early start to a chase if she ever ends up getting chased. Her decoding debuff is important as a rescuer in that it only activates once a survivor gets chaired, so she decodes like a normal survivor until a survivor is chaired, which in this game, if you're during the first chase, you're able to decode kind of normally, and as long as you have teammates that can kite for a long amount of time, not having a debuff on a rescuer is very, very good just for getting ahead in the early game. So I think overall it's really good. It also functions similar to Forward as excitement bait as well, so that can be a really good thing if you're wanting the hunter to not carry warp or blink and you get annoyed by that. Cord can be a decent pick about that. So up next, I would also be putting kind of at the lower end of A tier. I would put Prospector in here. Now, I would say that Prospector is very, very overall solid as a kiter, but can also function as harassment as well. And so I think that Prospector is a really good way to support a survivor without being really too committal with those magnets. Pulling the hunter back away from the other survivor can be really, really annoying from a hunter perspective when it comes to harassment. So I think overall Prospector is a very good survivor. There's pretty much nothing wrong with his kit, so Prospector overall is a very, very solid pick. Now up next, I'm going to put Fire Investigator. I believe that Fire Investigator is actually a very, very good support character. You can throw your ball there to assist the other survivors, but I believe that also Fire Investigator has quite a few characters that he hard counters. So he's able to do a lot of counters when it comes to Wheel is a big one, Clown is another big one, Dream Witch and Ivy both get countered, in that he's able to do some exploits with a ball to make it so that he can't be targeted by the ghost or by main body if it's Dream Witch. So Fire Investigator is pretty much a solid pick against just about anybody, but he does have quite a few kind of relatively more meta-ish picks that he specifically counters. So I would say that he's overall a really good survivor. Now, up next is a survivor that, in pretty much all my tier lists, I pretty much put her in top 5. But I believe that Priestess has kind of fallen off a bit, especially when you look at some of the newer hunters that have been added into this game. I believe that Priestess overall is very good when it comes to supporting other characters, but I believe that she has fallen off quite a bit when you look at characters such as Wheel. If you look at Goatman, there are a lot of hunters that are able to actually do quite a bit against Priestess, and she's overall in the community not feared as much as she once was. So I think she's overall still a solid pick. She's been seeing less and less use in tournament whenever she's offered, and she pretty much is, at least kind of nowadays, only really useful on the maps that she's known to be really good on. So the 3 maps that people are really scared of Priestess on is going to be Moonlit, Eversleeping, and Chinatown. Those are kind of her 3 big maps, I would say. But any other map, she's not particularly scary anymore. She still gets banned all the time in ranked because she's just a pain to go against. But when you're looking to win a match as a hunter, if you're playing hunters that are kind of in the higher tiers, Priestess is not going to be too particularly scary. I just ban her anyways because I play Mad Eyes. But up next, we have Gardener. I would say that Gardener is overall a really, really solid survivor. Really nothing wrong with her. She's able to rescue while injured, which is the really big thing for Gardener, with her shield. So she's able to get really clutch rescues just by having the bubble up. And yeah, overall she has a really basic but really solid kit that's hard to counter. So up next, I'm going to put Puppeteer. Now, Puppeteer is a character that I believe it was on my last Survivor tier list. I actually put him really low, but I actually think that he's a quite solid survivor now if played optimally. He's able to... His first chase is just really, really good, and the fact that he heals when other survivors get healed allows him to kind of passively take away chip shots worth of damage. Makes Puppeteer really, really solid. So I would say that overall he's a great, well-rounded character. He's also, if you're really, really advanced with Puppet, when he activates Lewis and does kind of that almost flywheelish type of effect, he can also cancel out 100 scare. He can cancel out any ability. He can also cancel out Naiad's water, which is really big. So if used optimally, Puppeteer is a very, very scary survivor. So I would put him up here in A tier. Now up next is a character that I would put up here just because he's just so consistent. And this next character is Embalmer. Even if you have a bad first chase, Embalmer is going to be a really, really solid survivor to pick because of the fact that it's really hard to win against an Embalmer. It's just kind of hard to explain it. He's able to coffin himself and other survivors. He has potential in the late game to make a comeback by placing a coffin inside the gate. He's able to do all sorts of these types of things. He gets essentially a free rescue. Embalmer overall is a really good survivor that you really can't go wrong with. Against most characters, his kit's very basic but very effective and is pretty much a guaranteed tie most of the time. So I would say Embalmer's right here. Now, up next is a survivor that's relatively newer. I believe that she has a lot of potential, though, and I'm really excited to see more of what competitive does with Meteorologist. So, Meteorologist is able to use her wind, push back the hunter. She's able to also fly and do a lot of... The big thing is she's able to do a lot of four-stop tricks in Moonlit. So I believe that Meteorologist is a survivor that can be simple yet effective. I believe that her abilities are really good, and the fact that she's able to kind of morph her ability to her needs makes it so that she has really good kiting abilities, but can also have really good support abilities if needed. So I think that Meteorologist belongs in here. She is relatively newer, so we'll see if she eventually falls off, but I would put her here. Now up next, this may be slightly controversial. I believe that Knight is actually a quite decent survivor. If you're able to get the mind game, you're able to get pretty much guaranteed rescues. Just if you use kind of the swing predict ability, a lot of hunters aren't able to really do anything to you off of that. So I believe that Knight is kind of the key if you're looking for like a rescue against a Bonbon or like another campy character. Being that he's also able to rescue without doing the full commit on the chair, he has a guaranteed escape route off of the chair with his kind of shield ability that he's able to activate. I believe that Knight is overall pretty decent. He's also really good with supporting against Opera because Opera relies on dashes, so if he can predict the Opera doing a dash and is able to cancel out that ability, that's time for a survivor to transition. I would say overall Knight just has a lot of flexibility, and he's also not particularly easy to chase either. So up next is a rescuer that I believe somewhat gets overshadowed by some of the other rescuers nowadays, and I would say that this is Mercenary. Mercenary is an overall solid survivor. He's able to get his he's able to use his elbow pads to traverse across big maps. Mercenary is really good at big maps, so his passive ability is one of the best abilities in the game, especially in the late game. Even if you get hit with detention, you can pressure a hunter to push for gate. He's pretty much a guaranteed rescue against most characters, so I would say that Mercenary overall is an A tier. He's very, very solid. Main things holding him back is if he gets double hit, he takes a long, long time to heal, and he has a bit of a punishing decoding debuff as well, which kind of makes some of the other rescue characters a little bit more effective, so I would say Mercenary belongs here. Now, up next, I'm going to put Aeroplanist. Now, Aeroplanist is a survivor that is very, very solid. He's able to kite a lot. You can put Tide on him. He can do all kinds of four-stop tricks. His hover ability is really, really good for traversing like large distances. So he doesn't really have too much of a drawback. I would say Aeroplanist is just overall a very, very well-rounded character. Now, the next character that I'm going to add is Barmaid. Now, Barmaid is basically just a better doctor in every single possible way. She's able to heal while she's moving. She gets a speed drink. She's able to do a lot of support healing, so kind of in a similar-ish fashion to what Psychologist is able to do, except that she's able to support mid-kite. I think that Barmaid is a very, very solid pick against characters like Ivy. A lot of chase hunters, Barmaid is also really, really solid against. As long as you can kite enough to get your first drink off, you'll generally be okay to 3-cypher kite. I think that Barmaid is overall a really, really solid character, so I put her in A tier. She got the buff so that chip shots don't necessarily cancel out the drink. She is overall just a good character. So up next, I kind of struggle whether to put this survivor in A or S tier. I believe that Novelist is an incredible survivor nowadays, because he's not only a solid kiter, but he's also very good at being a non-committal support character. So he's able to do the thing where he's able to stand in a pallet, switch between the hunter, and then get a quick pallet stun, and that can be really disorienting for a hunter if they're in the middle of a chase. Novelist is very, very annoying. He has some characters that he's not as optimal against. As I've mentioned, pretty much every character in this roster has their own specific counters, other than a select few that I've yet to get yet. But Novelist is overall, I think he belongs in A tier. He's a really, really good character. I think he has a lot of potential, and I think that overall he's a very, very good pick. I may be slightly biased because I played him in ranked today and had a very, very good match with him that has convinced me. So before I get into the last tier, I'd like to take this time to ask you all to please leave a like and subscribe. That helps me out a lot. Share the channel, helps me out a lot. We're approaching 2K subs, so that is the goal for now. So I hope you all will do that if you want to. Now we're going to get into S tier. These are characters that are really, really good, just overall solid, don't have a lot of specific counters. And the first one that I add to this list is Gravekeeper, which is weird for me to put him in S tier, but Gravekeeper has gotten so many buffs. Like, the devs really want this character to be good. Now if he gets interrupted out of shovel, his whole shovel doesn't get canceled, he gets some of it back. He also has gotten that thing where against chip shot characters, he is able to take 2 hits. I think Gravekeeper is overall solid, one of the, if not the best rescuer of the game, so I think he belongs in S tier. Now up next, I have First Officer, kind of for a similar reason. He's a bit better, kind of on smaller maps, but he's pretty free in the early game. If the hunter wants to commit, First Officer doesn't care. But he also gets the big thing on his rescue is that he gets a tide effect, which pretty much gives him a guaranteed kind of no-skill rescue. Nice and easy, very, very consistent. Also really good against Ivy, so if you're kind of looking for counter meta picks, First Officer is definitely one to look into. Now up next in S tier, I would put Acrobat. Acrobat is a character that's very, very good, especially in Moonlit, but he is a very, very good kiting character. Can pretty much kite 3 ciphers on his own, doesn't require too much support. He gets up to 6 of his balls during a match, which is kind of insane if you think about it. And he can also use, especially, the big one especially is the fireball. He can use the fireball to do a lot of assisting, so he's able to do an incredible kite on his own, but he's also able to support other characters if needed. So I believe that Acrobat belongs in S tier. Now up next, I have Psychologist. Now, Psychologist is a character that is very, very good. Any character that you can get 3 hits off of is not going to be a bad character. Psychologist with the stress, she's able to passively heal the other characters with her whistle. She has that kind of heal support ability type thing, which makes it so that if you have one of these other rescuers, they're able to come in for a second rescue without having to commit another survivor off a cipher. So works out really well with the timing of that. I think that Psycho is easily one of the top 3 survivors in the game. Now, up next, I would say the next best survivor in the game is going to be Seer, and kind of for the similar reasons that Psychologist is able to, Seer is able to, for any character of the game, take 1 hit. Seer has been an S tier character, I think pretty much since release. He's been up there. Devs have tried nerfing him, but they always tend to nerf stuff that just doesn't matter about him, like owl duration and stuff like that. Overall, Seer is a very, very solid support character. Not the easiest survivor to chase either, so I think that Seer is in S tier. And up next, the final survivor that I'm going to rate here is going to be Antiquarian. So I believe that Antiquarian is also a very, very solid survivor here. So I believe that Antiquarian is pretty much good against all of the current meta, I would say. I guess weakest of which would be Ivy, but I think that Antiquarian is really, really good. She's able to hit her stick against the hunter against the wall, makes it so that they're not able to swing. She's able to do her little leap if she needs to get out of really sticky situations. I think that overall Antiquarian, she also is able to harass. She's able to support other characters. She pretty much has it all, and with pretty much nothing holding her back too. So I would say that Antiquarian currently is probably one of, if not the best character of the game right now. And also Anti is not that bad against Hulla either, so I saw some competitive gameplay the other day, and Anti, if she's able to get her stick off, being able to have that 4, 8, or 12 seconds where she's able to transition another time allows her to get to an area where it can be tough for a hunter to get another swing on her. So I believe Anti currently is one of the best characters of the game right now. Even though she requires a bit of skill, Anti is still very, very good. Alright, and that's my final tier list. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, once again, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Once again, approaching 2K, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.